Hello, everyone. This is Bill Stevens, Senior Vice President of Foresters Financial, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the first installment of the 2019 WIFS Leadership Webinar Series. Today's topic, Get Warrior Tough, with our guest, Andrew Wittman. Dr. Wittman is a United States Marine Corps Infantry combat veteran, a former police officer, and federal agent. As a special agent for the U.S. Capitol Police, Wittman led security details for Nancy Pelosi and has personally protected Hillary Clinton, King Abdullah of Jordan, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, Sir Elton John, as well as a number of Fortune 20 CEOs. As a security contractor for the State Department, he has taught high threat diplomatic security to former Navy SEALs, Marines, Rangers, and Special Forces. He is the founder of the Mental Toughness Training Center, an executive leadership consultancy specializing in strategies on how to take control of your thoughts, your feelings, attitudes, and actions, especially under pressure. He's also the author of a number of books, including Ground Zero Leadership, CEO of You, and Amazon's #1 new parenting release, 7 Secrets of Resiliency for Parenting. Andrew's a guest lecturer at Clemson University and co-hosts the radio call-in show, Get Warrior Tough. Andrew holds a PhD in theological studies and has been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, Fox News, BBS, and many others. Now, before we get started, I just want to do a little housekeeping. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, you'll have a question box that you can type questions in, located at the side of the presentation at any time. And with time allowing at the end of the presentation, we'll be happy to answer some questions at that point. Before I turn it over to Andrew, I want to thank you personally for your service to our country. As a dad of a current Special Forces sergeant that just returned from his recent tour in Afghanistan, I know what you mean to this country, and I want to thank you personally for everything that you've done. And I also want to thank you in advance for sharing some of your thoughts with this group today. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our speaker. Please help join me in welcoming Andrew.
Bill, thank you so much. That was a great introduction, and thank you for allowing your son to go do what he does. I know it's hard for parents because you're not in the fight, and sitting on the sideline is sometimes more nerve-wracking than when you're actually there. And man, that's why the country's great, is because the next generation just keeps coming. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to be here. I am super excited to be part of what's going on with you guys. And I want to talk a little bit. Well, this is the part that's not in my bio, and I bear with me because it does, like, it kind of closes the gap, because all my stuff that I've done it's really great, but I didn't start there. I was the fat kid in high school, and I was bullied. I was 5'3", 185 pounds, and my nickname was Beach Ball. Right. And my mom and dad were missionaries. So I was brought up in a little town in Australia called Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. It's halfway between Sydney and Melbourne out in the outback. And I was one of 4 Americans in that town. It was me, my kid brother, my mom and dad. So, and as missionaries kids, we weren't allowed to fight back. So I had a lot of attention on me, and I was basically a crybaby. And so when I got bullied or whatever, I didn't stand up for myself, and I was living my life in fear and anxiety, and I turned to food for comfort. And I just, by the time I got to, 17 years old, I didn't want to live the rest of my life in fear and anxiety. And, I really need to get a hold of, just controlling myself and taking control of myself. And so I enlisted in the Marine Corps because I knew that they had what I needed. So, Cassandra, if you go to the next slide for me. I heard the great leadership guru, John Maxwell, say this one time. He said that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Well, and that, I'm very curious by nature. So that got me, I was like, man, I want to, kind of dig into that a little bit. That didn't sound right to me. But I dug into it, and I looked at the root word and where the word came from. And It comes from the Old English, and it's a derivative of the word craftsmanship. So here's the definition, the dictionary definition of leadership. It's skill in influencing attitudes, opinions, direction, course of action. Attitudes, opinions, direction, and course of action. And it's a skill like a blacksmith or a carpenter, right? It's as a craftsman, an artisan, there's a skill involved. And so I always ask this question, but before we can influence others' attitudes, opinions, and actions, who do we have to influence first? Well, of course, ourselves. So I like to ask this question: can you give anybody anything you don't have? If I didn't have $100 bill, could I give you $100 bill? And a lot of us, we find ourselves in leadership positions or management positions, and we struggle, right? Because we have a hard time influencing our own attitudes, right? Our own opinions and our own courses of action. And so that's why we call this Get Warrior Tough. It's really mental toughness. Cassandra, if you go to the next slide for me, here's our working definition of mental toughness. Right? And Bill said it in his introduction. Here it is. It's taking control of your thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and actions, especially under pressure. And I would ask you to just kind of write this down on a scale of 1 to 7. How good are you at taking control of your thoughts under pressure? Taking control, how good are you? 1 being not good at all. 7 is I kill it. I am in complete control of my thoughts. And then write down on a scale of 1 to 7, what is your, how good are you at controlling your feelings? 1, I'm not really good at it. And, my feelings can, my emotions kind of get the best of me. Or 7 is I'm in complete control of my feelings. And then the same thing with your attitudes. And I would ask you to even think about your actions. Now, your actions are a direct result of your attitudes, which are a direct result of your feelings, which are a direct result of your thoughts. So in this slide right here, I'm giving you the matrix of how you get your results. If you like your results in life, if you like your results in the leadership position, if you like the results as a parent or as a spouse or as a person, anywhere in life, if you like your results, it all started with how you think your thoughts. And then those thoughts turn into feelings and how you feel about a certain situation, which then dictates your attitudes, whether you have a good attitude about something, a bad attitude about something, and then you take action based on your attitudes. And I always like to liken it to like rush hour traffic, right? People are like, oh, I'm good at doing, I can control my thoughts and feelings. What about when somebody is like, you're late for work, and there's someone in front of you driving 25 miles an hour on like the 2-lane highway, and it's 55 is the speed limit, and they're messing with their phone texting, and you're like, you got to get to work. How good are you at controlling your thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and actions? Are you laying on the horn? Are you going to, fly by them on the double yellow line, go what we call counterflow, break the law, say something not so nice that, hopefully they can read lips on the way by, right? So this is what it's good. It's easy to say when we're in the webinar mode at our desk that, well, yeah, I'm in control, but put a little pressure out there, put us on a time clock, and you have to deal with somebody else's nonsense. And pretty soon it goes out the window, right? So this is mental toughness. A lot of times when I say mental toughness or Get Warrior Tough, people think like it's CrossFit or a Tough Mudder run or whatever. And like that's physical toughness. Yes, you do have to take your mind and like override your body. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But mental toughness is taking control of your thoughts and your emotions. And this is very difficult. Mental work is so much harder than physical work, right? So as a leader, it really requires me to get my own thoughts, feelings, and attitudes in order. And what I said in my parenting book, this is interesting because parenting and leading and managing is really the same job. Your subordinates, just like your kids, they don't do what you say, right? They don't care what you say. They do what you do, right? Like if I tell my kids clean their room, but my room's not clean, they're not going to have a clean room because, well, they're just going to imitate me. That's how humans learn. It's imitation. That's how we learn. Monkey see, monkey do, right? So think about that in your position as a leader. If you're not happy with your team and your subordinates, look in the mirror because they're probably just doing what you do and they're keying off of that. All right, so that's our working definition of mental toughness. Cassandra, will you go to the next one for me? All right, so I'm going to ask you guys a question. First off, did you know that the human brain has to answer a question? The human brain is the original search engine. Before there was Google and Yahoo and all the other search engines out there, the human brain was it. It always would search for an answer. So just to kind of prove that I'm right. Let's do a little experiment. No matter what I ask you next, do not recall this information. What city are you in? Stop it. Right? What's 2 plus 2? Quit. Who's the president of the United States? Stop answering that question. Right? So the brain, it doesn't have to come out your mouth, the answer, but your brain has to search for an answer. So if we all heard this, right? If you ask and you shall receive. But if you ask a bad question, what kind of answer are you going to get? Well, a bad answer. But if you ask a good question, you have a way better chance of getting a good answer. And what we should try to do in our, as mentally tough, awesome leaders that are super effective is always ask better questions. And I want to ask better questions of myself first before I ask of anybody else. And this question that I have up here, I call it the 2-minute rule. So here's a question I'm going to ask you. Do you think you could suspend your disbelief for just 2 minutes? Could you suspend your disbelief for just 2 minutes? And I'll ask it another way. Have you ever watched a movie in your life that you liked at any time? You watched the movie and you liked it. If the answer is yes, then congratulations, you suspended your disbelief for at least an hour and a half. Because I hope I'm not ruining anything for you, but those movies are Hollywooded up. Even the ones based on a true story, they're fake, and you have to suspend your disbelief because they ramp it up so that you would, enjoy it. It's entertainment, right? So you can do it. Now, I'm not as good as a movie, so I would ask you if you could just do it for 2 minutes with me in the next 45 minutes to an hour. If you could just do that every time, and here's what that, before you agree to it, here's what that looks like. When you hear the voice of resistance on the inside, because I'm going to say some stuff, and on the inside, you're going to hear, that won't work. That's crazy talk, Andrew. That's impossible, right? When you hear that initial resistance, if you would just suspend your disbelief for 2 minutes and then just ask yourself this question, how would I do it? Because I'm going to tell you to, here's some stuff. I'll lay out some principles and you're going to say, that won't work. That's impossible. Now, I'm not arguing with you that it's impossible. So, but this is what the 2-minute rule looks like. When I say to do something, you say, that's impossible. I said, yep, you're right. It's impossible. But if it were possible, I'll just play along with a fantasy. I know it's impossible. I completely agree with you. What I'm asking you to do is impossible. But if it were possible, how would I do it? How would I do it? And, right. So, and then your brain will go to work. Now, this is interesting because I come into some corporations, even some C-suites, big corporations. I'm in the boardroom with the heavy hitters, and someone will say whatever the problem is, and it's a big problem. And then someone else will say, that's impossible. We can't do that. It's usually dealing with a deadline or budget, right? Time, budget, or quality, like the 3 legs of the stool. It's one of those things, and we can't meet one of them. And then someone will inevitably say, well, that's impossible. We can't do that. And then I'll say, okay, no, I get it. We can't. Well, you're totally right. We can't do it. We can't make the budget. We can't make that time deadline. But if we could, how do you think we would do it? And then just let that sit out there, right? Because what will happen is usually within the first 30 seconds, we'll have 5 different options that something that was impossible 30 seconds ago. Now we have 5 different possible solutions that we could track down. So I'm going to ask you if you would just agree to suspend your disbelief every time that you hear that voice of resistance on the inside. This is the very first, this is the baseline, and it'll help you in every area of life. Whenever, a change comes down the pike or one more fire pops up on your plate, there's one more thing that you have to do, right now, you're like, I'm at my limit. I can't do anymore. Right. I get it. You can't. But if you could, how would you? Right. And then give yourself some cognitive space to begin to collect that information. How would I do it? How would I do it? How would I do it? And if you guys would agree to do that today, it'll help you. It'll definitely help you, not just in today's session, but going forward. Now, the reason that we're asking this of your brain is because we found out that's how the brain works. Cassandra, if you'll go to the next slide for me. In the last decade, we found out through cognitive neuroscience, through brain mapping and imaging, that we all take in 11 million bits of information per second. Every second, we're taking in 11 million bits through what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch. You're taking in 11 million bits of information per second. And here's the crazy thing is that only 126 bits goes to our conscious mind for action. We're literally discarding 99.9% of the information that we take in every second, and we're only acting on that one little tiny bit. Now, here at my house, I've got I've got super duper fiber optic broadband. I take in 1 GB download speed and 1 GB upload speed because I have a studio and stuff. So that is fantastic. Now, before I got the fiber put in, I had like cable, which was great, but it had 65 megabytes download speed and 5 megabytes upload speed. So I want you to think about this is how the cable works and broadband for our TV and our entertainment works. Think about your streaming a movie, right? An HD movie off one of the streaming services versus trying to upload the 200 pictures from your cousin's wedding over the weekend, right? You know how it takes so long to upload all those pictures, right? Because download speed, upload speed. The human brain works the opposite of our cable provider. You could upload all your cousin's photos in 5 seconds, but it would take you forever, literally dial-up speed to stream the movie. Now, because we know that the brain works that way, I have to ask this question because the human brain has to answer a question. How do we filter the information? How do we filter all this 11 million bits and then we only pick the 126? How does that filter work? And if we could figure out how the filter works, wouldn't that be helpful? Because your brain automatically sorts through all that information, picks the 126, and then you take action on it. It's funny because what happens is the filter is what we found out through fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging, with your brain that lights up, the sections of your brain lights up, and then sends the information. What we found out is that here's how we pick it. We pick it based on what we think, what we feel, and what our attitudes and opinions are. Does that sound familiar? What our thoughts are, what our feelings are, opinions, and our attitudes. Whatever our attitude or opinion is on something, our feelings about something, our thoughts on something, picks the stuff that backs us up. In psychology, it's called confirmation bias, right? So it looks like this in real life, real time. So you get up and you're like, oh, it's Blue Monday. Today's going to be an awful day. And your brain goes, hey, our genius self said today's an awful day. And it will begin to sift through the 11 million bits of information per second, find the exact 126 bits of information per second that prove your genius self correct, find all the things that make today awful, and it will discard anything that would go against your genius assessment that today is awful. Now, I'm not giving you motivational speaker junk. This is medical science, right? You literally medically, biochemically, electrochemically, your brain fires off and your life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think it's awful, today's going to be. Now, if you said today's going to be an awesome day, your brain will go to work and filter all that information, find only the information that proves your genius self correct, and today is an awesome day. Like if you literally like, damn, today's awesome. It's going to be such a great day. And then you got a flat tire on the way to work. Now, you say, well, see, today's not awesome. However, the person that pulled over to help you was like someone who is a multi-billionaire and was like, hey, I want to pay your house off. Isn't that great that your car got a flat tire? See, this is how this thing works. It's really all in your perception. So when I first learned this stuff, my wife asked me to take her to see that movie Les Mis, and I heard it was a musical. But I was like, I'm going to try this out, right? So I decided I was going to have a great time. Yeah, baby, let's go. This will be awesome, right? She did entice me. She said, hey, babe, Wolverine is in it. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And then she said, yeah. And the Catwoman from the new Batman movie. I was like, oh, we got to go watch it now. So we got there and I was smiling, having a good time. And listen, I was stretching my 11 million bits to the 126, right? Because I'm looking. This is going to be great. This is going to be great. And finally, and there was only 126 bits of information. At the end, there was a gunfight. And I was like, oh, it's the French Revolution. It's a war movie. Oh, this was awesome. It's not a musical. It's a war flick. So we had a great time. She had a great time. And what I got out of that deal was brownie points. Whoop. I'm telling you, brownie points are good, right? Because she loved the movie and it was a great memory for us. Now, what if I had not set my 126, my confirmation bias, my genius self, suspended my disbelief and figured out how I'm going to, enjoy this movie? What if I got back? I was like, hey, look, you know what? Wolverine can't sing. He should have just stick to comic books. And Catwoman or Batman, whoever she didn't even look good, right? She looked like she was a POW. Like, what? And what if I had ruined her movie? What would have happened was not only would I have not got brownie points, but she would remember that probably for like 2 decades. Every time someone said Les Mis, like I would be in trouble again because I ruined something for her, right? So this is how a good leader understands. If we point our 126 in the right direction, it'll pay dividends for us, could be 10 or 20 years down the road. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, how your brain works. And here's the question, because the human brain has to answer a question. Here's the question you should be asking yourself: am I pointing my 126 in a direction that helps me or hurts me? And I ask myself that question probably like a million times a day. Right before I'm about to, just lose it, I'm going to ask myself, am I, how am I viewing this? Am I pointing my brain? Is my filter working in the way it should be? All right, so let's, Cassandra, go to the next one for me. And what I'm going to do right now is hire each person on this webinar for the most powerful, prestigious position in the history of all mankind. You are now hired as the CEO of You Incorporated. Now, here's the job as CEO of You. It's to get your board of directors to act in concert for your betterment instead of your detriment. And I'm going to introduce you to your board. You know them as your body, mind, and emotions. Body, mind, and emotions. Now I'm going to ask you this question. When you have a boardroom meeting with yourself, who usually wins the vote? Body, mind, or emotions? I'll ask it another way. Have you ever made an emotional decision? And how'd that work out? Right? Usually not too good. Okay, but who should be running the boardroom is the mind. The mind should be running the boardroom. Now, listen, there's 3 votes in there. 3 votes. It takes 2 to carry the day. Usually, with most of us, emotions run the boardroom and the body sides with the emotions. We do stuff that we just feel like doing. Now, this is why people think of mental toughness. They think of the military or first responders or athletes, because in every one of those professions, there's like a physical fitness aspect to even get the job. You have to pass a physical fitness test, right? And then you have to continue to, be in shape in order to do the job, right? So that is where you're dominating your body. And you guys know this already. You've all heard like the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, or the body is weak. And in my house growing up, that statement was used as an excuse for having like a second piece of cheesecake, for dessert. Well, the spirit's willing, I shouldn't have that, but the body's weak. Oh, pass me another, piece of cheesecake, right? That's not what that's talking about. What that's talking about is that your body is the easiest of the board of directors to dominate. Your body is the easiest one to dominate. So that's the first level of mental toughness, is getting your body under control. And this really is the easiest one. But it's funny because in our society, with the obesity rates going up and stuff, it's funny because this is like the one that we seem to have the most problem with. And most adults stopped dominating their body after they got like potty trained, right? That was the last time they done, because that's the whole point of being an adult, right? I can go to bed when I feel like it. I can get up when I can eat my dessert first if I want to, right? So here's the thing about being CEO of You. If you really want the mind to run the boardroom, the emotions and the mind will never vote together. They're never going to side. They're diametrically opposed. So the only shot that you have of getting the mind to run the boardroom and to control your emotions is to get your body to vote with the mind. And that starts with sleep, nutrition, and fitness, right? So this is how we dominate our body. And when the science is, we know this, that people, CEOs come to me and they're like, I'm so stressed out. I'm like, how much sleep are you getting? Well, I only sleep like 2 hours a night because I'm so busy. Well, that's the first thing, right? We know scientifically that it's a fact that the human adult must get between 6 and 8 hours of sleep a day. Now, you don't have to get it all in one block. Before the Industrial Revolution, right, we had 2 sleeps. We would go to bed at dark because there was no lights on, and then we would get up, when the wood stove burned out, and so it's around midnight, and we'd have our midnight snack, and then we'd fire up the wood stove. You'd be up for a couple hours, and then you would go have another sleep. So you don't have to get it all at one time, but you do need to get 6 to 8. And you're just going to have to make that a priority if you want your mind, because what we know scientifically is when your sleep is off, your hormones are off. And when your hormones are what dictates your emotions. Like that's how your body and your emotions come together, is based on the hormone dump. And if your hormones aren't balanced, you have no shot. So you're in a bad mood, you don't feel good, you're in pain, and your cognitive processing goes down. And so the mind is weakened. So the first thing is to get your sleep. The second thing is, we already know this, is to eat healthful food choices, right? You got to eat healthful. You don't need anybody telling you whether, seriously, we all know if you're reaching for something that isn't good. Cakes, pies, and ice cream, we know is not a healthy food choice. We already know it. Know it, know it, know it. You don't need anybody to tell you. You don't need a diet plan for it. You just need to take control and get the body and the mind to vote together and go, hey, you know what? I'm going to eat celery sticks or salad or carrot sticks or something healthful. Okay. And then the last one is fitness. Now, I'm not telling you have to go join a gym or whatever, but just try like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, and park your car farthest away in the parking lot and walk into the office every day. And then stop eating lunch at your desk. Like, get up after you eat lunch and go for a walk. Or like one of my favorites is walking around while I'm on the phone. It cracks me up because I always hit on coaching days. So on Mondays is when I coach most of my private clients. I'm pacing back and forth in the office. I hit my 10,000 steps on my little, Fitbit thing, like by 10 o'clock in the morning, because I'm just pacing back and forth. So I'm not going to waste any of that time just sitting in the chair. So here's the number one rule. Go to the next one for me, Cassandra. The number one rule of being CEO of you is to separate logic from emotion. Now, remember, I said the mind and the emotions they'll never operate together. They're like the Department of Defense and the State Department. They have completely diametrically opposed missions, right? They'll never come together. So we don't want them to come together, because when you mix them, bad things happen. When you mix logic and emotion, really bad things happen. Okay. So like for a professional athlete, when they mix it, they're either going to choke or panic, right? It's when the field goal kicker, it's an easy chip shot, and it's like it's the Super Bowl time or whatever, and then you blink and a dunk, and then holy smoke, what just happened? Well, he choked, right? He mixed logic and emotion. For a business executive, it could be like a sinus clearing loss, right? And for the guys in my profession, the elite warriors, the spec ops guys, man, if we mix a logic and emotion, it's going to cost us, team members' lives, our own lives, or worse, get injured. Where it just totally changes how we can even, live on the planet. So for us, that's not for us. Now, I'm not saying emotion is bad. I've heard that before, where people say, well, business has no place for emotion. Wrong. Here's what we want to do. Both sides have their role, and they each need to stay in their lane, but they're both very important. Emotion, you should write this down, that emotion is our driver. It is the engine. It's the rocket fuel. Emotion is why we would do the hard thing. Emotion is why we would run into a burning house and save our kids or our mom, right? If they were in there, right? The emotion is the driver. Now, logic is the steering wheel. Logic is the rudder. Logic, we're going in to save the kids or save mom. Logic is, okay, now what's the plan? What's the plan? So, because a lot of times we get emotional and we're like, yeah, then that's the decision. And listen, here's how the machine works. We all do stuff for selfish reasons. We all do things for emotional reasons. Every decision that we make in life, I'm not saying this is good or I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it is. Every decision that we make is for an emotional reason. Now, once the decision is met, it's the driver. That's how we got you're getting off the launch pad. It's moving us. Now we have to steer with logic. Once you make the decision that I'm doing this or I'm not doing that, right? We use logic to steer us through the minefield or down the path. So if you try to switch the two, I think about it like this. I like to use the example of a ballistic missile. Ballistic missile, it's on the launch pad. It's a rocket. We're going to launch this missile, right? North Korea is in the news and all that. They have their ballistic missile testing and all that. So here's it. Logic is the guidance system. That's what logic is on this missile, is the guidance system. That's your mind. Your body is actually the housing of the missile. It's the missile itself. It's it's the fins and the fuselage and all that. That's your body. And then your emotions is the rocket engine, the fuel that is in the rocket engine, and that's the thing. Now, imagine you're the missile, and you're going to engage the guidance system. So your guidance system is working. What happens? We fired off the guidance system. Where's the missile going? Nowhere. Like, the guidance system is worthless until you fire the rocket. You could steer all day long. It's not going to go. It'd be like your kids when they're practicing driving, when they're little kids, they get in the driver's seat and they want to imitate you and they're shoving the steering wheel back and forth in the parking lot. Where's the car going? Nowhere. It's not, so you're not steering it anywhere. So this is the thing. Be aware that that logic is not necessarily better than emotion. Logic is better for steering, but it will not get you off the launch pad. We call it analysis or paralysis by analysis. If you just keep thinking and rethinking and thinking again and rethinking, that will not get you off the couch. Now imagine that you just fire off the emotions. Boom, we take off and the rocket takes off. Now where's it going? But we're not engaging the guidance system. This thing is just flying. Now where's the missile go? If we don't engage logic, where's the missile go? We're just flying on emotion. Well, we don't know where it goes. Now, if perchance you did happen to hit your target, that would just be by luck, and there's no way you could duplicate that. But most of the time, that is such a small, you got a better chance of winning the lottery than just firing off a missile without a guidance system and just letting it go somewhere. This is usually what happens. You'll make the emotional decision, or someone, not you. We'll talk about other people, right? Other people, what they do is they make the emotional decision. They fire off the rocket pad. They don't engage logic or the guidance system. The missile goes flying all over the place, all over the sky, back and forth, and then it lands somewhere and it blows up. And a lot of times we end up hurting people or ourselves, right? The missile is off target and there's collateral damage. So what we want to do is use both of these systems, just like the missile, in conjunction with each other. And I hope you guys, that makes sense to you. Cassandra, we go to the next one. All right, so this is, I spent a lot of time in law enforcement, and I want you guys, have you ever made a 911 call or you heard one on TV? Does the 911 operator, when you call, well, how do they answer the phone? Are they like, oh my gosh, there's an emergency? Are they freaking out? Are they reacting emotionally? I'll ask you that. No, what they're very calmly saying, 911, what's your emergency? So this is what we want to do as CEO of us. We want to move ourselves from the emotional reactor column, where I just react to everything that happens to me in life, and I want to move myself into the first responder column, just like the 911 operator. I want to slow everything down. I'm not going to be freaking out. And whenever new news comes in, whatever it is, good news, bad news, sideways news, it doesn't matter. When I get new information, I'm going to act like the 911 operator, because what they do is they ask questions. 911, what's your emergency? Like, you should write that down. This is the very first question that I always ask myself when there's anything that presents itself to me. I'm going to ask, is this an emergency? Because 99% of the time, it's not an emergency. And I'll give you a fresh example right off the presses. Last night, my little girl, she's in freshman in high school. She's starting in varsity lacrosse. She's the only freshman starting, so I'm super proud of her, right? And the team was out there, and it was a home game. It was their first home game of the season, and they were getting crushed by another team, just getting crushed. And the parents of the other team were very boisterous and spirited in their cheering of their team. And one of the other moms was sitting there with me, and she goes, these people are getting on my last nerve. I asked her, I said, well, why? Why do you think that is? She said, well, because they're cheering. I'm like, they're cheering for their daughter. Wouldn't you cheer for your daughter? I mean, the only reason I can be offended if I want. That's what I could be offended if I want. I'm like, well, why would you give this person who you don't even know, who's a mom and a dad from another, city, you don't know who they are. Why would you give them the power to make you feel bad and be offended? Why would you give them that power over you? Because you're emotionally reacting. She's being an emotional reactor. So we need to move that reaction into the first responder column. Listen, we would be cheering. The only reason we're mad is because our daughters aren't doing as good as we think that they should be, right? And the only way to fix that, right, get warrior tough, the only way to fix that is to get back to practice and work on the fundamentals, because we're going to look at the film, we'll see all the stuff that you did wrong, and then we'll correct it. Like, it's not be emotional about it, right? Not get upset and get offended, right? This is an emotional reaction. What I need to do is take that reaction and move it into the first responder column, right? And act like the 911 operator. Remember, the human brain has to answer a question. Remember, so you're like, well, and here's the pushback. Well, Andrew, you don't know who said what to me, right? I don't. Well, I can't do that, right? I get it. You can't. But if you could, how would you move yourself into the first responder column? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because what I did is I gave you guys a formula, a 1 + 1 = 2 formula. And here it is, E + R = O. E + R = O. Now here it is, external factors plus your response equals your outcome. Now, you can't control anything external to yourself. I can't control the weather, the traffic. I can't control the parents from the other. I can't control anybody else but me. So the only thing that I can control is my response. Now, this is what we call insanity, when you keep reacting to the same set of external factors and expecting to get a different result. That's insanity, right? So we're going to fix that with this first responder thing. And we're going to begin to channel the 911 operator whenever external factors happen. My new response is going to be, what's your emergency? And then I'm going to begin to gather information. And it will change my result. Change my result. Okay, Cassandra, go to the next one. Now, what we've discovered is that, and I just break this down to 4 levels. There's more different levels, but there's different levels of human thinking. And for our purposes, I like to keep things simple. Most humans operate in one of these levels every day of their life. Now, the lowest level I call is autopilot, which is really just being disengaged. I was up in New York City a couple of months ago, and I had been walking through Times Square. And if you've ever been there, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, just watch it on TV sometime. But people are on auto, they're all looking at their phone, and we're just walking down the street, and then they all stop. Now, are we stopping at the corner of the intersection? Are we doing it because the light's red or the light's green? And we're all just standing there. And then when does everybody walk? Well, we walk when the first person starts to walk. We're not looking at, everybody's still looking at their phones. And so autopilot, are just on the herd. It's disengagement. It's kind of how you drive your car home at night. You'll make hundreds of life and death decisions driving home tonight, and you'll never even think about it, right? And when you're operating an autopilot, it's the body that's running the boardroom. The body is running the boardroom. You're just doing stuff on autopilot, unengaged. Now, the next level, I don't want to say it's up or sideways, but it's negative thinking. The negative thinker at Times Square would be like, man, you know, I'm not going to cross the street because I know 1 million people will cross the street and they'll be fine, but I'll be the one person in 1 million. As soon as I step off the curb, I'll get hit by a truck, right? That's the negative thinker. Now, listen, I don't hate negative thinking. It will keep you alive. Okay. It'll keep you alive a lot longer than positive thinking, where positive thinking is, this is what they say in Times Square, I could lay down in the street. It doesn't matter about this. Cars will swerve. They'll stop. Nothing bad will happen to me. And no, I did 11 deployments, right? Making my living with a gun for 30 years. At no time did I ever have with sunshine and waterfalls and walk up to the bad guys, the Taliban, and ask them, did somebody need a hug? I would not be talking to you today. Okay. So positive thinking, I am not a fan of. Negative thinking, it's keep you alive longer, but you're not really going to enjoy life. Now, both negative and positive thinking, the emotions are running the boardroom. The emotions are running the boardroom. Now, where we want to go is to be a critical thinker. A critical thinker is where the mind is running the boardroom. Now, in Times Square, the critical thinker says, I look both ways. I check for cross traffic. I'm not following the crowd. In fact, I'm only crossing this street because I have a target. There's a reason for me to cross the street, and I'm going to weigh risk versus reward in crossing the street, and I'll make up my own mind based on the evidence and the facts that I see, and make my best decision. See, that's where logic is steering, and that's where we would like to be as a critical thinker. Now, I hear the word critical thinking, the term critical thinking, like bandied about. Especially, I do a lot of stuff for scientific research, like the CDC, the FDA. Like we talk about critical thinking all the time. But when I ask, do you have a process that you could tell me how you think your thoughts? It gets really difficult to come up with that. So what I did, if you go to the next one for me, Cassandra, is I break down critical thinking into a 4-step process. 4 steps. I call it thinking like crap, so that way you can't forget it. Thinking like crap. Now, this is the Socratic method. Now, if you look at the critical thinking steps that they teach in academia, there's really 9 steps, but 9 steps is too unwieldy. It's just I'm giving you the top 4 steps that'll get you 95% of the way there, right? In real life, real time. Okay. So thinking like crap. The first thing is clarity. I need to ask myself before anything else is, what's my target? What is it that I do want? Not what I don't want. See, most people say what they don't want, not what they do want. Now, I teach marksmanship and I teach snipers. Imagine you're with me on a sniper mission and we're in Afghanistan up on a mountaintop, and we work in 2-man teams, and I have the rifle and you have the observation scope, and you're looking and you're like, all right, Andrew, what's the target? And I say, see that rock over there? And you're like, yeah, I see it. I say, that's not it. What? Okay, well, what's the target, Andrew? Okay, see that tree over there? Yeah, I see that tree. We get dialed in. We're on the tree. We focus in. We see that. Yeah, that's not it. See, meanwhile, the bad guys just drove right past us, and now they're on their way to do, bad things to good people. So this is how most of us operate. We've been taught since we were little to say what we don't want. Now, remember when our moms and dads were teaching us to cross the street? Look both ways. Why? So you don't get hit. Is that the target? What we found out in neuroscience is that when you say don't and then anything after the don't, the brain chops don't off and whatever's left becomes the new target. Like, don't think of a pink elephant. Don't think of it. Well, you automatically think of the pink elephant by me saying not to. So begin to a critical thinker phrases everything on what they do want, what they do want to accomplish. What's the outcome that they want? What is their target? Not what their target is not. I work with police chiefs and they'll say, I don't want this on the news. Well, where's it going? Or sales rep. I don't want to lose that $1 million account. Well, where's that going? I have business owners. I don't want to get audited. Well, we know what's happening is they're getting audited, right? Because that's just how the brain works, is that you automatically go, chops the don't off, whatever's left becomes the new target. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Try to catch yourself in the next day of how many times you say what you don't want, and then try to rephrase it and say what you do want. It's a lot harder than you think, because we've been trained only to say, that's not my target. That's not my target. That's not my target. But you're like a sniper would never do that. They know exactly what their target is. They're not even going to go behind enemy lines unless they knew what their target was. They can't live their life like that. Okay. So then the next thing is relevance. Now, I liken this to, I say, is this a sand trap is the question for relevance, because for the golfer, what's the target is the hole. And I ask golfers, are the sand traps relevant? Yeah. What about the water obstacles? Yeah. Well, don't hit it in the water obstacle. Where's it going? Gabloosh. Don't hit it in the sand trap. It's going to the sand trap. So until you know what your target is, you have no idea whether something's relevant or not. So, and here's another great question to see if something's relevant. Is this helping me or hurting me hit my target? Is this helping me or hurting me get the outcome that I want? Is this helping me or hurting me accomplish whatever my mission is here? Like, have you ever been in a meeting where we got off target and we're stuck in a sand trap for 2 hours? Like, yes, but sometimes you don't even know you're in the sand trap because you don't have a clearly defined agenda for the meeting, and then say, hey, we got to get back on target. Okay, so the next thing is accuracy. Accuracy is, I ask this question, is this a fact or a truth? Facts and truth are completely two different things. When I was in law enforcement, right, well, if a case went to court, what got entered into evidence was facts. What the witnesses swore to tell was the truth. Now, we know that eyewitnesses are unreliable at best, and facts are way, way more reliable. So a critical thinker hears a truth and moves it into the fact column. Now, here's a truth and fact. It's here, I'm in South Carolina, and it's 68 degrees today, 68 degrees out, which that's a fact. Now, if I had just flown in from Alaska where it was like 40 below, my truth would be that it's hot here. But if I had just been in Panama down by the equator and where it's 98 and the humidity is like 100% and the sun's out, when I landed here, my truth would be that it's chilly because it's 68. Now, the human machine operates in truths. It'll take the facts and operates in truths. When someone says the boss is a jerk, that's a truth. A critical thinker, I need to move your truth, whatever the truth is, into the fact column. The boss is a jerk. Well, what is the facts of his behavior that make you say he's a jerk or she's a jerk? When I say it's warm, what are the facts that say it's warm? Well, it's warm because it's 68 degrees and I just came from Alaska where it was minus 40. Those are facts. So if I can move truths into the fact column and slow everything down, I don't get all spun up out of control. Because someone said, I mean, think about how many times people talk in truths. It's just ridiculous. Like, that's hard. That's a truth. What does that mean? That's hard. Compared to what? What is it that's making you say that that's hard? And then the last thing is the P, the precision. Once we move a fact in our truth into the fact column, we say, could this fact be more exact? So I want you to think of, have you ever gotten the email where it had like ASAP on it and the red thingy, right? Was it big ASAP or little ASAP, right? So if it's big ASAP, right? ASAP's a truth. It means different things to different people. I need to ask the boss, well, when exactly do you need this by? Well, I need it by Wednesday. Okay, now we're cooking, because we went from ASAP, as soon as possible, a truth, to Wednesday, which is a fact. But Wednesday is a big block of time. Right? So can this fact be more exact? I need precision. Yes, it can. What time on Wednesday? Oh, I need it by lunch. Is lunch a fact or a truth? Well, it's a truth, because do you eat lunch the same time every day? In fact, I don't even eat lunch, so you're not getting it, right? So now we're back into the truth column that fast. No, I need it by 12 noon. And then I'm going to ask you for Eastern time, Central time, Mountain time, Pacific time, right? Because we're all in different time zones. I have clients in Australia. I even have to say Australian Eastern time for them, right? So Yeah, I need it by noon Eastern time, 12 noon Eastern time, Wednesday. Now we're cooking with gas, right? If you filter every thought through this clarity, relevance, accuracy, and precision, initially it's going to be slow and herky jerky, just like when you were learning to drive the car. But eventually, if you stick with it, what'll happen is you'll begin to, by habit, by autopilot, have your body begin to be a critical thinker. And that's really where the magic happens. You want to create the habit of thinking like crap. All right, Cassandra, you go to the next one. All right, so boom, I'm right on it. 45 minutes. We got 15 for Q&A. This is my contact information. If you need to get a hold of me, there's no fence around me, okay? You can get a hold of me in a bunch of different ways, and I will respond, I promise. So I hit it hard and fast. I hope you guys got a lot out of it, and now I'm ready for questions.
Okay, folks, so remember, if you have any questions, just put it in that side box. To get us started, Andrew, to what degree do you think we can learn to become mentally tough? And, a second part of that is, do we have a predisposition based on our genetics to become mentally tough, or is that something that we can overcome?
That's a great question. Okay, so what I found in my research is that the human machine has mental toughness and resilience born in them. And we already know this. We've heard how many times. Well, kids are resilient. But what happens is we lose touch with how to deploy and tap into it. So every human is born with it. It's just a matter of how do we tap into it. And then what we know scientifically is that willpower is just like a muscle. The more that you use it, the stronger it becomes. And so we haven't been taught these skills. We've kind of lost touch with them along the way. And in school, we stopped teaching them. And so everyone is predisposed towards mental toughness. So I just have to find out what your emotional driver is, or why you would do the hard thing, and then tap into it and deploy it. But it's just like a physical skill. Thinking and mental toughness is like a physical skill. Like any athlete practices taking shots on goal or throwing passes, or any of those. It's a skill that can be trained, just like driving the car. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Kind of a follow-up to thinking like crap, right?
Yeah.
Is the practice of visualization, part of that getting the clarity part? And if so, can you explain that a little bit further?
It is, and I'll tell you, most of my clients, they have the hardest time with getting clear on their target. And visualization is a huge part of it. You need to see in your mind's eye, or I call it your imagination, or create a movie clip of what it is the outcome that you want it to look like. Now, we're doing this already, but most of us create the movie clip of the outcome that we don't want, the worst thing that could happen. That's what worry is. That's what anxiety is. That's where like the fear-based thinking comes from, where you get called to the boss's office, like getting called to the principal's office. Oh my gosh. And then you start thinking about, what did I do? And then you're playing out this movie clip of all the things that could go wrong. Instead, you need to play out. Now, if I get called to the boss's office, I'm going to visualize this is my big shot to get some FaceTime with the boss, and I'm going to get promoted out of this thing or advance my cause, right? So what's my target going in there? A lot of people, their target, if they got called to the boss's office, they'd be like, oh, I don't want to get fired. Well, chops the don't off. Well, I don't know what happens next, right? Hopefully it doesn't happen. But for me, I want to visualize the outcome that I do want. I want to get promoted. I want to be in the spotlight. I want to be the guy that solves the problems. I want to be the go-to person. So there is a lot of that visualization, playing the movie clip, but get clear before you even pick up the phone or answer an email or a text. Think about it. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? What is the outcome that I want? Like, I like to use my kids as an example because like, if they don't eat their gummy vitamins in the morning, do I really want to get in a fight and wreck their day over the vitamins? Or could we, is that the outcome that I want, that they have extra stress going to school? Or is there another way that I can help, hit my target of getting them to take their vitamins plus do good at school? So I need to slow everything down and really think about that. What's my target before I could take off really on the rest of thinking like crap? So yes, visualization is a big piece of that.
That's great. Thanks. Again, folks, anybody that has any questions, please put them in the sidebar and we'll try to get to them. Andrew, as leaders, are there maybe 2 or 3 most effective habits and things that we can practice that can cultivate that we can cultivate right now to become more effective as we're trying to lead people and organizations?
Yeah, and I would definitely 100% across the board to really be a leader, we have to channel the 911 operator and become a first responder. I've got to stop emotionally reacting to everything that comes onto my plate. And the way I do that, again, is that's that 2-minute rule, suspend my disbelief, right? How would I do it? If I could do this, how would I do it? And just slow everything down. Now, this is a good question for people to write down. Now, everybody's been to the class, so then everybody's not going to ask themselves, how would I do it? When someone comes to me and they say they throw fire on my plate, right? There's a crisis, and I'm going, no matter what they say, I'm going to ask them, how do you mean? Like, write that down, because this comes out of my mouth like that's my initial reaction. No matter what someone says to me, I'm going to ask them, how do you mean? Not what do you mean, because what do you mean has an edge to it. And I know how do you mean, it's not grammatically correct, but it works. It's softer. And I actually put my hand on my heart when I say it, like, how do you mean? So, like, I say it so many times that my wife told me, stop saying, how do you mean to me? Right? I'm like, how do you mean, baby? Right? Because instead of just putting my mouth in, third gear and like, blah, and that came out and then I can't get it back down range. And listen, I had to learn this the hard way. If I slow everything down, get somebody say, how do you mean? Get them to rethink what they just said, to re-articulate it. Because listen, sometimes, and this happened to me, where I say something that comes out the wrong way, or I chose the wrong word. And when I say, how do you mean? If someone says, how do you mean? It gives me a chance to take it back, right? Re-say it and repackage it in a way that may not be so abrasive, right? Or it may clarify stuff. And now while they're rethinking and having their cognitive space to rethink and re-articulate, I'm having my space to think, how would I do it? How will I respond to this? Right? So how do you mean for other people, and how would I do it for me? And those two things as leaders, if I could just practice those two things, it's amazing the results, and you don't have to even be perfect at it. I mean, Babe Ruth, right? He's Hall of Famer, struck out twice as many times as he hit home runs, and his lifetime batting average was 342. That means he was wrong 2/3 of the time. Listen, there's no pressure to get this stuff perfect. You'll raise your success rate just by doing this stuff a little bit. So how would I do it for me, and how do you mean when I'm talking to other people, to give myself that first responder time, that cognitive space to move myself into that 911 column?
That's great. Thank you. I have one last question here, unless we get some other questions from the group. And this one is, what one habit or practice can we do to help us avoid emotional reactions, that blowing up that you talked about, and really letting our emotions take over?
Yeah, and this is huge. I'm gonna ask myself that first question that the 911 operator says: what's the emergency? What's the emergency? What's the emergency? Usually, I mean, stuff is not an emergency. Like, it could be something just totally simple as a deadline being moved. Is that an emergency? Like, are deadlines real or fake? Let me ask that, right? I mean, we know deadlines move all the time. Like, April 15th is tax day. What happens if you don't file? Well, you file an extension. And then what happens if you don't, make it? Then you file another extension. And right. So relax on the deadlines and all that stuff. Is this really an emergency? Now, if it legitimately is an emergency, you definitely should not be an emotional reactor, right? Because can you imagine if a firefighter showed up and your house was on fire? It's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Like, the firefighter's emotionally reacting. We're in huge trouble, right? So we want to, like, cut all that emotional stuff out on the reaction. We use motion for the only thing we use emotion for is driving us to do the hard thing. When you're reacting, emotion is taking over the guidance system, like that missile. And listen, there's going to be collateral damage. So the one thing, if you did anything from today, like, that's the thing. What's the emergency? What is my emergency here? Is there, like, and just slow everything down and stop. Because what happens in the body is when you have that emotional reaction, there's literally what I call the hormone dump. Hormones flood your system to sustain your response, fight, flight, or freeze. And those hormones can't leave your system for 20 minutes. So you're not even rational during that time. It's almost like if you were in a near wreck car accident, right? Brakes were slammed, horns were honked, nothing happened. And after it's all over, logically, everybody's safe. Then all of a sudden your heart starts pounding and you get sick to your stomach. That's the hormone dump. And then it takes 20 minutes for that to leave your system. So if you go ahead and emotionally react, you're probably setting yourself up for at least 20 minutes of, like, non-rational thought. So if you're aware of those things, then you don't even, like, trigger that. and then you're off to the races on something that's not an emergency.
Absolutely makes sense. That's why we always say wait before you answer, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Like
especially on emails, I'm going to wait 24 hours on an email.
Yeah.
If I could possibly wait, I'm waiting.
That's great. All right. Well, I'm just going to summarize a couple of things here. Obviously, Andrew started off with leadership being a skill, and it's a skill that influences our attitude, our opinions, our direct and direction of course and action. And since it's a skill, it can be learned. So take control of your thoughts, your feelings, your attitudes, and your actions. We get a ton of information. What was it, 11 million bits? And we can only really take in 126. So make sure that you've got the right attitude and you're thinking positively so that you're taking in the right information. Emotion is the driver, but logic is our steering wheel. You need both, but don't let your emotions steer the car, and don't let your logic try to get you going, because it won't happen. And be like a first responder, be a critical thinker, and think like crap. So make sure you understand what your target is. What do you want? Don't think about what you don't want. What do you want? Make sure that what you're looking at is, you know what the relevance is. Is it something that can help or hurt you? Be accurate. Determine between fact and truth. And if you hear a truth, try to put it in the fact column and get as precise as you can. Get more exact, and it'll help you in your decision making. So I hope everyone enjoyed today's session. Andrew, I think it was outstanding. I want to thank you again. This concludes today's webinar. We invite you all to register for the next leadership webinar on May 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to be precise. More details can be found on the national website. A brief post-program survey will appear at the conclusion of this webinar, and we ask that you take a moment to complete the questions. Your feedback is a great value to us and helps us plan future programming. So at this point, I'd like to thank all our corporate partners for joining us on today's webinar. Your participation is appreciated. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope everyone has an outstanding afternoon. Take care, everyone.